Welcome to the Graybeard Chronicles podcast. Your hosts, Brian Halstead and Kevin Harkins, are two gray-bearded patriots who love God, their family and friends, and their country. The Graybeards are here to inspire, inform, and educate you on a myriad of topics they are passionate about. Brian and Kevin have a strong desire to share this with you to help you live your best life. Sit back and enjoy this amazing podcast as the Graybeards pass along the wisdom of the ages.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Graybeard Chronicles. I'm Brian Halstead.
And I'm Kevin Harkins.
And Kevin, we're here to pass along some wisdom of the ages. What the heck does that mean?
We're not perfect, but we do have gray beards. And that means we've got some significant life experience, some life lessons, and some perspectives that are worthy of passing along.
Well, I think that sums it up nicely. Let's get to it. Kevin, what is going on? Hello to you, sir.
Hello, Bryant. How are you? Never ceases to amaze me the things I learn about you.
What's that? What did you?
You're a mime. Yeah.
How so?
Yeah.
How so?
I mean, you're just kind of acting things out here as we get started. And
well, that's because I know that I'm going to edit that part of the video out, so nobody's going to actually see it to begin with. Except for me and you right now.
Okay.
When we see it recording.
So people are going to be wondering. All right. So while the music was playing, if he does edit out, you were kind of doing the kiss thing, the sticking your tongue out.
Gene Simmons, man.
There we go. That's right.
Yep,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, you were doing that.
Yeah, he got that from me. No, not really.
You just revealed something about your age. There you go. See?
Yeah, no, he's actually older than I am. A lot older than I am.
I don't know.
I don't know about a lot, but he is definitely older than I am.
I mean, if you taught him how to do that, then that was a long time ago.
Yeah, true that. Can't argue with that. Hey, I'm a little worried, man. Are you going without notes tonight? There's no iPad open here.
I am.
You got this subject locked on. You don't even need notes.
I actually do. I'm trying to get better and better at that. I'm trying to be prepared enough in advance that I can, you
got paper notes in your pocket, don't you?
I do
You're
not.
gonna break them out.
I do not. I will try to do that more and more often. Actually,
all right, that's
because
cool.
This is what I noticed. I noticed that if I'm well prepared, and same with you. It just and then I'm not relying on my notes to have the conversation. It just seems more interesting to me.
Yeah, I'm with you. No, I agree. And most of the time I'm ended up making the notes out of my head anyway, so it's just like an exchange of information from my head onto my computer and just reminders. Because I think, at least for me anyways, I get engaged in the conversation, and you'll say something that'll take me down a different path, and then I forget about something that I wanted to say, and so that just helps me keep the train on the tracks.
But yeah, that's true. And so if this doesn't work, then I'll go back to the way it is before.
Nice.
Don't hold me to this. Don't hold me to not looking at my notes, because I'm gonna try it though.
Yeah. No, I just happened to notice your iPad's laying over there, but it's all closed up, and that's unusual.
I actually went through just while you were kind of asking that question. Do I want to open it or do I not want to open it? And I'm gonna leave it. But I do understand.
Now I'm making you second guess yourself.
No, I'm good.
Stop.
I'm committed. But you're having some boundary issues lately. That's what I've heard.
I don't know if I like the word issues.
Challenges?
No. And I don't know that. I guess we could say issues. We could say either one of those. Doesn't matter. Just the subject.
How's that for a way to introduce it?
No kidding. The subject of boundaries has come up.
Yes, it has.
We should talk about that.
Yeah, let's do it.
In a podcast?
I'm ready.
All right. Boundaries are important, and I think that we have conflict in our life, and we have angst in our life, and we have stress in our life, and a lot of those things could be eliminated through the proper establishment and communication and enforcement of boundaries.
Do you have? I completely agree, and I'm sure we're going to get into it. But do you have some significant scars in your life as a result of lack of boundaries that you can think of?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that I would say significant scars.
Okay.
But I could certainly, think of just everyday circumstances where you have your feelings hurt because somebody is not aware of a boundary that you have because you don't know them well enough to have communicated that to them, or they don't give a shit enough to respect that boundary. That's a whole different conversation, and the question of why are you still interacting with that person. Yeah, I mean, boundaries are important in relationships, and they're a huge source of stress for a lot of people. And if you don't fix them right, or you don't set them, and like I said, communicate them, and then hold others accountable to respect those, then you're gonna have problems. And you have to hold yourself accountable to respect the boundaries that you set. One of the things about boundaries is it's what you say yes to and what you say no to, and establishing those things for you and holding yourself accountable for your own boundaries.
Let me tell you why I think this subject.
I gotta adjust this microphone. I think like I'm leaning down to it.
Is important. Among us in this conversation, because you may not recall, but you have spoken about boundaries a number of times in our previous podcasts, and I noted it at the time. Every time you did it,
right?
And the reason that I noted it is because I know in my own life I've had, issues with setting boundaries, not out of conscious effort to not decide to do it.
Right.
I just didn't think about it. And that, I think, is where a lot of people, probably most people, don't go into a new circumstance, a new relationship, a new work environment, wanting people to understand their boundaries. They just don't think about it. It's not even part of their mental calculus. And so they just sort of drift into a situation. You don't do that. That is something that you've been talking about since day one that I met you. And I think that's pretty remarkable, actually, because a lot of people don't. And I
appreciate you calling that out. Because now that I'm thinking back, you're absolutely right. I do talk about it and have mentioned it several times. We've never dedicated an entire podcast to it, and at the same time, it's clearly something, and I know it is. It's clearly something that's important to me, and I'm glad that I'm walking that talk and staying focused on it.
But I wonder why. What do you think? Where did you learn this? I mean, did you? I
don't know. I don't know if if I sat down and thought about it, I might be able to identify it. I just, I think boundaries are just one of those things that, it's how, and I've said this, people are going to treat you how you allow them to treat you. And, people don't just, meet you and know, okay, well, he's a, this or that, and this is how I need to treat that. But you have to teach them, because different people are, needing different things. And I'll use this example. I love it in a funny, kind of shaking my head way when I hear somebody in a leadership role say that they're fair and they treat everybody the same, because those two things contradict one another.
Okay.
Because we are not the same. We don't always need the same things, and you can't be fair and treat everybody the same way.
Yeah.
Because different people need different things. So you got to figure out what that person needs and what this person needs and what the one over there needs, and utilize your interaction with them and tailor it to suit their needs and yours, right? Because a relationship's a two-way street.
Yeah, the point that you made about teaching people how to treat you, I think, is a great one of many great applications of setting boundaries. And if you go into a relationship, if you go into a work environment, if you go into any one of these aspects of life and you don't do that, then all of a sudden stuff starts coming at you. And even with, as we all know as parents, kids will test you. They'll want to know how far can they go,
right?
And they'll push you. But the thing is, we as human beings never grow out of that. And so when you grow up and find yourself in the workforce, people that if you were a supervisor, they're going to test you.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to want to know, where are those boundaries?
Right.
And if you haven't thought through that, all of a sudden you're, possibly
right.
in
you got to watch those little bastards too, because they'll do the same shit they did as little kids, like
that's right,
parent shopping, but they'll just do it with supervisors. And you got to cut that shit off as soon as it starts.
Right.
You can't have that going on. But it's cool because I actually, now I'm watching my oldest granddaughter grow up, and she has arrived square in the Y zone. Right. So she'll be 3 in July. So for the last few months she's been in the Y. Everything is Y. And what's interesting, the only difference between her and the two of us and all the other people out there in the world is once you reach a certain age, for the most part, you stop asking that why out loud. At least not all the time. You still ask it, but it's always spinning around in your head because that's the way your mind works. It wants to know, why do we do this? Why do we do that? And it's interesting because little kids are cool because they have no filter, and because nobody has taught them one, and they're just saying what they are thinking. Why?
Yep, absolutely. And that actually reminds me of a quote that has been said in different ways by many people, and I don't remember who said the way I'm going to say it most similarly, but it's predetermined thought predicts present action, right? Predetermined thought predicts present action. If you take the time to think through the whys, if you answer the question about why do I have these boundaries, first of all, just acknowledging that you need to have boundaries. And you need to have boundaries in every area of your life.
Right.
Personal relationships, work relationships, fun, hobbies, clubs that you're a part of, all of those things, you need to take the time to say, why do I need boundaries in those areas? And once you ask yourself that question, then it becomes, what are those boundaries? Then another question is, why those boundaries? So the whole thing about, and if you've taken the time to do that, predetermined thought predicts present action.
And what are boundaries? I don't know if we've specifically called that out, right? So I've said that, boundaries are your yeses and your nos, but ultimately it's what you're okay with and what you're not. And being able to identify that. So, you're okay with somebody interacting with you in this manner and not in this manner. You're okay with somebody doing this, but not doing this. You got to know what those things are. And, down there, if you dig the dirt back a little bit, you'll find your values, I think, are some of the contributing factors to the boundaries that you set. And but you've got to be able to call that out because, like negativity is one of mine. That's a boundary for me. Don't bring that shit around me. I desire to live in a drama-free zone, and if you're having some challenges, you need some help working through some stuff, I'll be the first guy to jump in and offer some assistance. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I'm going to tolerate about this freaking much of the woe is me bullshit and all that negativity that goes with it. So yeah, don't bring that to my doorstep.
That was a boundary that all the children in my family, my siblings, grew up with. The no whining rule. That was hard and fast in the family that I grew up in. And if you whined, I mean, there was zero tolerance for whining in my childhood growing up. I mean, you could express an opinion, you could say why you didn't like something, you could have a conversation, but as soon as it's sort of turned the corner into whining, that was it. And the conversation was over.
Yeah.
And you got shut down right there and right then. And you learned, no whining. No, make it a productive conversation. Don't whine about it. And
yeah. Don't complain about stuff without at least coming forward with some potential solutions. Don't lay your troubles on somebody else to always solve them for you.
Right.
Be willing to engage in the problem-solving process yourself.
So I'm now putting myself in the position of the listening audience and somebody who was like me or maybe is like me, and I say was because I'm not that way anymore. And you've actually helped me with this, but that is, if you don't take the time to recognize that you need to set boundaries, or you don't fully understand that you need to do that, just taking the time to acknowledge, wow, I've never really thought about that. And yeah, I'm being treated like shit. Why am I being treated like shit?
Yeah.
By people who are around me, surround me, or wherever, because you have made it clear to them what they can get away with, and they will take advantage. People will do that. It's amazing what people will do when they know they can get away with it.
Yeah, it's like letting a dog run off leash. You know, you got to set some boundaries for that dog, and let them know where they can go, what they can do, and so on and so forth. It's we could dive in, and I could think of a whole bunch of different details, but I mean, ultimately, it's like I said, you gotta identify what those boundaries are, communicate them to other people, and then enforce them. Right, hold others accountable and yourself accountable to those boundaries. Right, so if you identify them, that's an I. Right, if you communicate them, that's a C, and if you enforce them, and I should get rid of all these ifs and change them to whens, because we know what ifs are, right? Or ifs and buts for candy and nuts would be Christmas all year long. But when you enforce them, and you think about those three letters, ICE, ice, just add some ice to your life, right? Create your boundaries, identify them, communicate them, and enforce them, and respect other people's boundaries too. And
I like that. I like that a lot.
And how do you know what somebody else's boundaries are? Whose responsibility is it to identify them? Is it the person with the expectation, I would think, or is it incumbent upon you, the person that is now interacting with that individual, to ask how they want to be treated?
Yeah, to me that gets into kind of it could get weird if you're going on asking people what are your boundaries.
Or I don't know that I would say it just like that.
Right.
Right, unless your neighbor's trying to identify property lines or something like that.
There you go.
Yeah.
Proceeding with caution, being gracious and being kind and being a little bit, don't go too far until you figure out where the boundaries are. But here is my next question for you, because this is going to happen. It does happen. What do you do when your boundaries and somebody else's boundaries on the same issue are not in the same place?
So they conflict?
They conflict, right?
I think you have to have a conversation. Well, first off, you have to decide if you want to continue to engage, because it may be something that you can just wave off on, and it also depends on what that boundary is, right? So how is it a boundary that's in stone, or is it something that you would prefer to have happen 95% of the time? Do you have some flexibility? And then like I said, you decide whether or not you want to continue to engage in this scenario, providing that you have a choice, and go from there and talk it out, right? So just have the conversation, bring it up. Hey, I tend to operate like this, and I like to engage in this manner. It appears to me, and I want to make sure I'm not perceiving this wrong, but it appears to me that you want to operate in this particular manner, and I just want to figure out if there's a way we can kind of meet in the middle.
And where I think this is particularly important, I agree with everything you said, but that is in a marital, a partner, a life partner kind of relationship, that especially in the courting phase of that relationship, before you formally commit and tie the knot, if you choose to do that.
Right.
But getting all of those things out on the table, and I can tell you I didn't do that at a certain point in my life, but it can be the simplest thing. I'm just trying to. It can be. Here's an example for me. I like to eat dinner fairly early. It's just something. My body's hungry. I've been working hard all day.
I think it's our age, man. I like to eat dinner. Yeah, I think it's our bodies actually conditioning us for the discounted restaurant eating hours.
Yeah, because you realize the value of money as you get older,
right?
And you want the discount. There you go.
Yeah.
No, and so just being very clear about I want of course there are going to be exceptions, and there's going to be diversions, and there's going to be all kind of reasons where from time to time that doesn't work out. But generally speaking, I want to eat early. You good with that? Let's figure out ways that we can do that.
Yeah, and they, people around you that care about you and pay attention, you can call it out, or sometimes you don't have to, because they know. Like my kids know.
Right.
They know when we have Sunday dinner here, and they're all here, that we're not eating at 8 o'clock at night.
Right.
It's 8 o'clock at night's one of those. Y'all don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. because I'm going to be going to bed here in about an hour.
That's right. You know? And a classic example, especially when you have grown kids, because the grown kids tend to like to stay up later, eat later, especially if they're like young 20-somethings, because, you know, they're coming out of this sort of college age phase where they don't go out till 10 o'clock at night. You know, that's when things are just ramping up. And, boy, those days are long gone for me.
Yeah.
And so
it'll happen every now and then, but for the most part.
Yeah, exactly. But just you've communicated that boundary. Whether you called it a boundary or knew that, you've made it clear, I'm going to eat early. And I think that's just one very simple, real-world example of in a spousal relationship where you're raising your family, this is our general rule. You know, of course, don't be enslaved to the process, but respect the process. And the process is we're generally going to eat early.
Yeah, and, you know, one of the things I'd also say about boundaries is, you know, don't walk around getting pissed off at everybody that violates one of your boundaries.
There you go.
Because, you know, unless they deserve it, and the ones that may deserve it may be the people that are well aware of what that boundary is and then with intention decide to violate it. That's a whole different conversation. But for the most part, I don't think people are walking around trying to offend other people or hurt their feelings.
No, you're right. They just don't know.
You know, so you have to kind of assume positive intent there. And you know, if you didn't like the way it worked out, then that's when you have the conversation and explain what the boundary is and why you feel that way about it and so on, and you know, give them an opportunity to adjust their behavior.
Do you really have dinner at 3:30? That's amazing.
I don't recall saying 3:30. I mean, I can go back and review the tape, but I'm pretty sure I just said early. I'm pretty sure I just said we're not having dinner at 8 o'clock. Now, I didn't say how early we were going to have it. I do. It all depends. Sometimes I'll eat at like 4:30.
Okay.
Yeah. 4:30, 5 o'clock.
Yeah. Oh, I'm definitely.
Yeah.
5 o'clock. That's you know, if it's start passing that, but you know, I have blue hair.
Oh, it's blue this week.
Yes.
All right. Well, now we're starting to get somewhere. But yeah, I think it's important to assume positive intent, and you know, I mean, there's, like I said, there's lots of different scenarios where you know, boundaries can come into play, and this is one that I've seen come up, and you know, the friend thing. You know, so you and I have, let's say I have a friend, and I introduce you to that friend, and then this relationship between the two of you develops, and it's like, you know, leaving the third person out of the loop. And, you know, while sometimes there's legitimate reasons for that based on, you know, synergies or professional compatibility and the need to work together in those realms, but at the same time, I think you can, you know, as that initial friend who made that introduction, you might feel a little slighted by that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think that folks need to be sensitive to that.
You bet. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad I know that about you. I appreciate it.
Don't make me cut you.
I will cut.
No, but I'll tell you, right?
Absolutely.
So I mean, I don't operate with, you know, expecting people to you know, do the guesswork.
Right.
You know, I'll tell you. And that's another thing that I think is important is like I said, people are going to treat you the way you allow them to treat you, and if they don't know, you got to teach them, and
Right.
don't be an asshole about it, and you know, I mean, unless that's necessary, and sometimes it is, and you know, just talk it out. I mean, my friends, the people I care about, the people I hang around with, we know how to treat one another because we've been in that friendship or whatever for however long it is, and we've trained one another. Yeah, I think it's important.
Yeah, I want to move the discussion over into the professional realm, and both from a leader's perspective as well as from a follower's perspective, and talk about the issue of boundaries. First, the more challenging, in my view, the follower. You are part of a team. You're in your workplace. You have a boss and probably a boss above the boss and so on. There's several layers above. And you're dealing with this issue of boundaries. How do you do that?
So what boundary are we talking about? Are we talking about a chain of command type boundary?
That could be it.
Yeah, so you know, that's another one for me, right? So follow the fucking chain of command.
Okay.
And so here's the interesting thing, though, because this is what really pisses me off, is when you have people in a leadership role that don't respect the chain of command. because it's got to go both ways. If you expect people to follow it, then and you got to kind of set that example. So yeah, the chain of command's a big deal, and I don't certainly it's. I think I mentioned parent shopping before. That can happen too in the work environment where they're just going around this particular supervisor because they're difficult to deal with, and going over here to someone they know they'll get the answer they want from. Yeah, that's not cool.
So there are a lot of businesses out there that a lot of organizations where the chain of command is not what you're describing, and so that it's much more loosey-goosey, and it's much more sort of I will describe it as flat rather than vertical and more horizontal. And so there's all kind of relationships that will occur. Would you say that is an environment that you personally, because you want to respect the chain of command, that you will avoid those kind of circumstances? The reason I ask the question is because it's important for people to know this about themselves.
Yeah.
And if they're like you and you say it's chain of command, might have something to do with your military experience, might have something to do with you were a Marine, might not. I don't know where it comes from.
I think it depends,
right?
Because I think when you engage in any given environment, it's incumbent upon you to kind of survey the situation, right? So it's kind of the when in Rome scenario. So you have to figure out what's going on and understand what the methods of operation are in that organization. It's one of those things where, like I said, if it's stated it's this way and it's actually in execution much different, that's that conflict is when I have an issue with it.
Okay.
But no, I can work in either environment.
Okay.
As long as it's called out.
Yep. And you're used to it. And the reason I asked that particular question is because as soon as you said respect the chain of command and do all that, everybody knows because we did a podcast on it. I've been doing a lot of reading and studying kind of on this Elon Musk thing.
Yeah.
And he is, at least, I've never met him. I've never worked at Tesla. I've never worked at SpaceX. So I'm just kind of going on what I read,
right,
and what I observe,
right,
which may not be exactly what the reality is. But he apparently is the kind of guy that will reach down into the organization to any person at any time he feels like it. And it's a definite violation of a kind of a traditional chain of command.
Right.
And you just got to know that that's the environment, like you said. You got to know that's the environment you're in. And if you're not okay with that, you have to just self-select out. Right. That I can't exist like
that. I think people want to know the rules of engagement in life.
Yeah.
And in any scenario, whatever it is, whether it's work or in a personal relationship, they want folks want to know what those rules of engagement are, and then they get to make a choice whether or not they can abide by those and stay engaged or get out.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you don't make those decisions consciously, and that's one of the things about doing this podcast with you that has lots of scales have fallen off of my eyes on a variety of topics.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Because
I would agree.
When we get into it and we start talking about it, and I could share story after story after story about I went through significant periods of my life just sort of drifting on this issue of boundaries, because you're right. I just sort of assumed that people around me knew what my boundaries were, and they didn't, or they were in conflict. But I never consciously took the decision to say, this is a boundary. I know this is where I stand, and I'm going to ice it.
Right.
That's the process.
My feelings got hurt.
Right.
Well, you need some more ice.
Right. Yeah. It's what a great metaphor to not even a what is it?
We'll call it an acronym.
Acronym. Yep. All right. Great acronym to.
Yep. Very cool. Yeah, I had because I might even change the title a little bit, because ultimately the title was going to be boundaries. Set them, communicate them, and respect them. And I got to thinking about it, and I was like, well, if you identify, because I wanted it to be an acronym, because I'm a jarhead, I like acronyms.
Right.
So that's when the ICE thing came up. Identify, communicate, and enforce.
Right. Yeah. So, go ahead.
I lost it. Go ahead. Back at you, sir. Ping pong.
I was just trying to take it, and so that we can connect to every major area of life. We talked about personal relationships. We talked about a little bit about setting boundaries at work, which is a different challenge, right? Because a lot of times, especially as a follower, we didn't finish up on the leader part. As a follower, a lot of times you don't get to choose what the boundaries are. I mean, you can choose about yourself and this whole idea of how teaching people how to treat you.
Right.
But there's a company culture, there are company norms, there are company rules that you gotta. When you make the decision to become a part of this organization, think about your motorcycle club.
Right.
There are all kind of boundaries that are in writing.
Yeah, and if in the work environment or in an organizational environment like that, people vote with their feet. Right. They don't like it.
Right.
Get stepping.
That's right. That's right. If you don't like these boundaries, then this is not the place for you.
Right. And there's some, hard and fast rules or some of those boundaries that are, chiseled in stone.
Right.
That's great that you'd like to have a conversation about it, but we're actually not going to, it's not going to do any good.
Right.
The only thing, I shouldn't say that, because it actually, one of the things it can do is create clarity that someone may not have had.
Right.
Somebody might become aware of this boundary and have an adverse reaction to it. When given the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with them and explain the reasoning behind it, it may create that clarity and actually soften the rub that they were experiencing.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So as a leader,
all right,
you got to now set the boundaries, consciously to make sure that those who were, under your supervision end up behaving in a way that's acceptable to you. I mean, it's the blazing obvious, right? Now that we've talked about it as much as we have already.
Yeah.
It's
it's just, and we could go back and forth all night talking about, boundaries, and it's really, to me, it's a form of self-care. You talk about, go to the gym, take care of yourself physically, eat right so that you have good nutrition, etc. Boundaries and setting them and reducing the amount of stress that you're experiencing because of people, maybe violating them, and the angst associated with that, can make things a whole lot easier for you, and it's better for your mental well-being.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of that way, but you're right, it is, because then you can just rest at peace knowing that you've done that, and people will respond to it. It actually reminds me of, as a parent-child relationship, if we have some new parents that are out there listening to this, you got to know, and you will if you don't know already, that children need boundaries, and you need to be very clear with communicating what those boundaries are. And the thing is, when a child has a boundary and they know where that is, they're much more secure in their existence. It's not like they're wondering, does mom or dad care about this particular issue? I know they care, because when I did this, there was some feedback.
Yeah, no doubt. There was pain associated with that. Right. Clearly, that was a boundary I kind of stepped outside of. That's absolutely true, and I think that's I think people in general, and I've said that earlier, that people in general like boundaries,
right.
Because then they know, I can operate here. Boundaries are like those guardrails. They keep people from going out of bounds in your life and treating you in a way that you don't want to be treated.
Do you think it's necessary, or would you recommend, when it comes to these boundaries, that you take the time to write it down? Or is that
yeah,
I mean, some people will, but
I think that's an individual choice, depending upon how you process things, and I don't know that you need a card, like when you meet somebody and you here, just so you know, these are my boundaries. It's like your business card. It's got your name and contact information on one side and your boundaries on the other. You just flip it over. That's actually not a bad idea.
That is not a bad idea. That is not a bad idea.
My likes and dislikes. I like honesty, compassion, and empathy. I dislike liars, and you could just. There's actually some value in that, I think.
I think it's actually a very closely aligned conversation with the whole thing about values.
Yeah.
If people have and we have encouraged people to write down their values,
Yeah.
I think that's beginning to get into a lot of the whole boundary stuff. And I would say directly on the corporate front, on the business front, organizations that have their corporate guiding principles down in writing, those are boundaries. This is how we will behave. And
they're only boundaries if you know what they are.
Okay.
Right. And I say that because there's a lot of organizations that go through that exercise of identifying what those are. And you could walk into that organization and ask any number of employees and they wouldn't be able to tell you jack shit about it.
Right.
And that's just a waste of time and money and effort associated with doing that exercise. So, yeah, as long as they're something that they're actually living by and they know, then, yeah, absolutely, I completely agree.
Yeah.
You know, you ask anybody in our motorcycle club what our values are, what our guiding principles are, and they fucking well better know what they are.
They know them. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. It has to be part of the orientation. I'm sure it is, going back to the motorcycle club.
Right.
In fact, people have to go through, I'm going to call it an internship. I know there's another fancy word for it. What do you call it? It doesn't matter. So they have to go through a period of time where you're kind of, making them earn their way.
Absolutely.
And part of that is an observation of, are they living by the guiding principles that you have put in place? That's wonderful.
And that's a constant evaluation. That starts from day one as a prospect, a prospective member, and it never ends.
Okay.
There's a constant evaluation of, are you living up to those values?
Yeah.
We say our prospects, they earn their patches piece by piece, and then once you have been awarded all those patches, then each day from that point, you earn the right to continue to keep them.
To maintain it, yeah. Okay, there you go. You said it better than I did. Well, there you go. See, that's a great example in an organizational setting of how you can do that. And I also know of families who have taken the time to write this stuff down as well. I have not been a part of a family like that, but I do know families that have said these are the family values that are important to us.
Right.
And
that's very cool. I like that.
Yeah. I think it works because it's not, again, it removes the drift from life. And that, to me, is how people waste the most time in their lives, when they're just sort of disoriented and we don't know what we're doing. We don't know where we're going. We haven't set our goals. We don't know what our values are. We don't know what our guiding principles are. So what happens? You drift. You just sort of, go through the motions every day in your life. And then eventually you'll bump into something and the world will give you feedback. That's a
right. Or you'll bump into someone,
right,
and they'll give you feedback,
right.
Yeah.
And then you'll realize there's a boundary there. Okay. So there you have it.
I think it's a good conversation to have, so I would ask folks that are listening to think about that. What are your boundaries? What are your things that are okay with you? And this is, exactly the way you want to be treated. And what things are not okay with you? Things that you're not going to accept. Things that, ways in which you will not allow people to treat you or behave in your presence. It's important to know what those things are and call them out and identify too what you'll say yes to and what you're going to say no to. There's stuff out there that is not a good use of your time. Time is finite, and so you have to decide how you're going to allocate your time and what you're choosing to spend it on. And this that's where your yes and no's comes in. Gotta know when to say yes and when to say no, because these some folks out there, and I've been guilty of it in the past. You say yes to everything, it's going to wear you out.
Yeah,
absolutely wear you out.
Yep. No doubt about it. Yeah, and what I will add to that, said in a slightly different and sort of my own way, is if you don't take the time to identify what those boundaries are, what's going to happen, and again, just speaking for myself, you find yourself in a circumstance where people are violating your boundaries, and you don't tell them because you think that that's going to maintain a health. I can't tell them that. So you don't tell them that. And then you start to resent.
Yeah.
Things.
You can't.
Right.
You forfeit that right. Silence is acceptance.
Yeah.
If you choose not to say something, then you have agreed to give that value, that boundary or whatever it was up.
Well, they just didn't know, or they didn't mean any harm, or
okay. Well, that's the assuming positive intent part,
right?
And if you want a change to be made, then you're going to have to communicate to them, or decide that it's not that important to you and let it go.
There you go. That's the point. The point is you got to go through that mental calculus to determine, is this important enough for me to address? And if it's not, then let it go. That's fine. It's not important enough.
So I got to flash back to your question about in the corporate environment or the work environment where leadership and followers and so on, and the conversation that we were just having about people that say yes all the time. It's easy, very easy. It's a path of least resistance to go to your yes people, and I don't mean by yes people, I don't mean the people that nod and say yes to everything you say, because those people are, well, that's a whole different conversation. But the person that's always going to say yes to whatever it is you ask them to do, because they're a workhorse in the organization and they are just pulling the hell out of that wagon, right? Be careful in a leadership role, because those people will keep saying yes because they care so much about the organization and have the respect for people that are leading the charge, that they'll just keep saying yes till it burns them the fuck out.
Yep.
And that'll be a problem. So someone in a leadership role needs to be aware of that and temper that a little bit. And sometimes even those people, even when that person is saying yes, excuse them from that scenario or that whatever it is, because they need breaks.
Yeah.
You'll burn them out.
Yeah, you are exactly right. And let me just share with you a specific example of what you're talking about from my own life. I've blown it a lot of times, but there was this one case that I got it right. When you are in the Coast Guard and you graduate from the academy and you go to your first ship, there are a number of very key qualifications. I'm probably not unlike a police officer, that you have to go through and accomplish in order to continue to advance and promote. And when we first reported aboard, my generation of ensigns who just came out and went to their first ship, we went as a group. And I remember a very specific conversation the operations officer said, the most important thing you have to do here is qualify at these various watch stations. And everything else is a distant second priority, or should be, in your life until you get these qualifications. Everybody acknowledged, everybody nodded their head, everybody said, right on, got it, sir, no problem. Then we started marching toward these qualifications. But just like you said, the people who work hard and get shit done are the ones where more and more stuff gets piled up upon
back to them.
And guess what suffers? The pursuit of those really key qualifications. And they all of a sudden are falling behind. They're not meeting their gates. They're not meeting their deadlines. They're doing great stuff. They're awesome as the soda officer. They made sure that it got bought. And,
right.
All of these things that don't matter, but they're lacking on their qualifications. And I had the conversation with him. I said, boss, you keep loading me up with more and more stuff. It's having an impact on my ability to get qualified. And you told us that we needed to be focused on that. And I can do what you're asking me to do, but this is going to be the consequence, and this is what's going to suffer, and this is how much later my qualification is going to be manifested. And he said, wow, okay, let me take some of that stuff off of your plate so that you can do that.
I wonder if he was setting you up to see if you'd figure that out.
That's a good question. I don't know.
Right, because it's important to be able to be self-actualized so that you do understand that what's happening here. Yeah, that's pretty powerful.
There you go. There's a good example. And multiply. All of us have those examples in our lives. Don't we?
Yeah. The reason I know to talk about that is because I've been one of those guys.
You betcha.
And that shit wears you out, man. And things start to suffer.
Right.
And it's not a happy place for anybody. So just be aware of that. So boundaries are important.
Yes, they are.
If you find yourself in a situation where you're getting irritated about a lot of things, you're having difficulty in relationships, and people are just pissing you off like it's the right thing to do on a regular basis, there might be some boundary issues going on. Maybe some identification of boundaries that you need to do, and communicate those things out to other people, because and
enforce. Don't forget.
Yeah, and enforce them. Ice them. Yep.
Ice them.
That's right. If you're getting your feelings hurt and getting pissed off on a regular basis.
Put some ice on it.
Put some ice on it. Identify those boundaries, communicate them, and enforce them. And enforce them, not only externally but internally. Hold yourself accountable for those.
You bet. I like it.
All right. What else? What have we not said we need to say?
I've said it all. I've hit all my high points.
All right. Very good. Well, I enjoyed the conversation. That's until you called it out. I mean, as soon as you called it out, I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right. The fact that I have talked about these numerous times, it turns out it is important to me. So
don't drift.
I'm glad we had a full-on podcast talking about boundaries, because I believe they're important, and I believe that establishing them can certainly make your life a better place for you and everybody else that's involved in it with you.
Yeah, remove the drift. The less in life that you drift trying to figure out what it is that you're supposed to do, the better off you're going to be at moving toward those goals that you're trying to accomplish. So,
yeah, lived with focused intention.
Yes, indeed.
And setting those boundaries is part of that focused intention.
F.I. Focused intention. Looking for another phi. Semper Fi.
Right.
There we go.
There's one. That's right.
Focused intention rather than fidelis. Faithful. Yes. All right. We digress.
We're going to start rambling here. We're going off. The train's leaving the tracks, buddy. All right. So I'm going to push the button now, because I almost forgot last week, and you.
I've been thinking for the last 5 minutes that I need to tell you.
That I wasn't going to forget it. So no matter who you are, where you are, and what you're doing between this podcast and the next, make sure you take time to enjoy the ride and identify your boundaries.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Graybeard Chronicles. Please subscribe so you'll receive notification when new episodes are available. To learn more about the Graybeards, visit their website, graybeardchronicles.com.